Hi, good morning. I'm Kim Gi-ho, President of Samsung SS Asia Pacific. Thank you for joining us today as we share more about our on-premise SSEMM solution for government and high-security enterprises. I'd like to start by introducing SDS. SDS is the IT solutions arm of Samsung. Founded in 1985, we now have 25,000 employees across 40 offices globally. We offer enterprise-level IT solution and platform for government, defense, education, banking, and other industries. In Asia Pacific, we cover Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand markets, with our regional HQ in Singapore. Expanding our on-premise EMM to Australia, you have partners with Mobilise IT, who will be fronting the consult and implementations on ground with you. We hope today's session will be enriching and looking forward to meeting you all in person soon. Thank you. And I pass the time to Mobilise IT. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Kehoe, and good morning, everybody. My name is Andrew Fox. I am the Sales Director for Mobilise IT. Welcome on behalf of both Samsung SDS and Mobilise IT to this webinar introducing Samsung SDS's EMM on-premise. The agenda for the event is in front of you. I'm going to do a quick recap as to what Kehoe Gunn has covered for the introduction of SDS, plus introduce Mobilise IT. Go through the highlights of the solution sets, look at some global use cases. These are existing customers to give you an example as to where the solution is already in play, and then a summary at the end. For those of you who wish to ask questions, please enter any questions in the comments section of the webinar. There will also be an opportunity at the end for a Q&A as required. So without much further ado, let me head into the session. As Kehoe has described, Samsung SDS is a global organization, over 25,000 organizations, 40 countries, not in every location. And we have partnered with them specifically to cover the Australian New Zealand marketplace to support their delivery of this solution set into our market. Across the globe, they support multiple industries in specific segments, focusing on an integrated enterprise-level solution SI platform. And they have a plethora of customers, many of whom are household names to all of us globally. More than that, Samsung SDS are partnering with themselves, essentially with the electronics company, to bring together the best of both parts of the organization, using their PM and integration skills to deliver true outcomes to the customer set. Mobilise IT is a best-in-class specialist mobile device management, enterprise mobility management, UEM organization with decades of experience in the space. We have tens of thousands of devices under management with a very high level of customer satisfaction, and we provide service and support desks across the globe, across those organizations 24/7. We have partnered with Samsung SDS not just for this introduction of EMM, but also for core products called Zero Touch Mobility, which is based off the ServiceNow platform, another one of our key partners. We have the right levels of ISO certification for the market, and we are one of the most qualified and certified EMM partners in country. Many of our years of experience have been in delivering on-premise EMM, as well as moving some of those EMMs to the cloud, which I guess is somewhat ironic given this webinar. However, that experience has taught us that not all EMMs should be in the cloud, and there is a real place in the market for an on-premise version. And today, I'm so pleased that we're able to fill that now gap in our portfolio with this on-premise EMM from Samsung SDS. Our customers match those of Samsung SDS in terms of scope and breadth, and these are many of the household names that you would have in the Australian New Zealand marketplace. So let me proceed by going into some of the highlights of the Samsung SDS EMM package. The most important thing, I guess, is why anybody would want an EMM on-premise. I said before that our experience covered the implementation of EMMs on-prem and then moving some of these to the cloud. My own personal experience goes back nearly 2 decades in this space across multiple vendors. And whilst it is sensible for some vendors to consolidate their development efforts in taking an enterprise mobility management or an MDM platform solely to a cloud-based approach, largely to streamline support for efficiencies of operation and to make sure that things like patching can be done universally on one common system, there remains a need for a different approach. And that different approach has been highlighted, I feel, since the pandemic in 2019 and 2020, and since what appears to be an increasing degree of uncertainty geopolitically. I think there are a number of organizations who are now looking at returning to an on-premise environment to fix what are now perceived problems with the cloud infrastructure. And they cover things like data sovereignty and control, where all device and user data needs to be retained in country, be that in Australia or in New Zealand. It avoids exposure to foreign jurisdictions, for example, the US Cloud Act. In terms of security and compliance, the ability for an on-premise solution to meet certification and where cloud vendors are unable or unwilling to make the changes to achieve that degree of certification. And those include air-gapped solutions where there is no internet available to the user and internet separation must be enforced. In terms of customization, an on-prem EMM, and particularly this on-prem EMM, allows for direct integration with internal systems or ticketing tools without cloud connectors. I think we're all aware that most global systems are now moving towards all integrations are through those cloud connectors. And it's quite critical to eliminate those from the infrastructure when hardening for the higher levels of security. It also allows us to provide tailored workflows for industries and sub-industry segments which use specialized devices without the need for providing firmware updates over the air. So that customization and the integration with legacy systems is quite critical for an EMM provider to cover. In terms of latency and availability, this is the local facilities to provide a better performance than external clouds, and the ability for us to provide that performance when an external cloud might suffer from a critical industry failure. And lastly, on the internal cost side, our ability to protect investments or existing investments in on-premise infrastructure and costs and people who are supporting that environment rather than taking that out and putting it into a cloud platform. Externally, the external influences on those decisions are equally telling. I've covered the geopolitical implications already, but the rising tensions around the world are merely just a sign of things to come, we feel. And I've touched on the US Cloud Act, but the ability for the US providers to have or to reach in and send data that is stored in Australian cloud to the US government upon request is beginning to alarm some organizations. And countries in the Five Eyes, including Australia and New Zealand, are tightening rules about classification and sovereignty. And this is pushing a lot of industries back to reconsider an on-premise environment. Cybersecurity and supply chain risk is a global phenomenon with an increasing exposure to the threat surface around the world through cyber criminal attacks. You've seen some of the things that have happened just through internal error as well. Some of the bugs that have appeared in systems like SolarWinds and Proctor. These things cause cloud and supply chain uncertainty, and an on-prem environment helps protect against those by preventing the updates that introduce those faults into the systems. Critical infrastructure providers, energy, healthcare, defense, for example, are being advised to consider, and indeed legislated to consider, resilient strategies that include on-prem fallback options. I've touched on that regulatory pressure and compliance. It's not just local, but it's global. So the need to cover off things like the European GDPR and other financial regulation authorities and health regulation authorities requirements is critical in providing the infrastructure required. In terms of resilience and business continuity, we have seen some quite high-profile failures in 2023 and 2024 across the global cloud platforms, causing downtime in both AWS and in Microsoft Azure. These disruptions provided more pressure on critical industries to cover or provide a local fallback option where an EMM on-prem can support that continuous operations. And lastly, the introduction of AI at scale, particularly associated with cloud, raises questions of uncertainty in many people's minds about what data is being used to train the global AI models. And it is a collective need for security to protect our data from being used to train those models globally. Again, we can achieve all of that using an on-prem EMM. So organizations that benefit most, I think, quite clearly fall into the government sector, very specifically into the defense and the security sector. I think I've touched on the Critical Industries Act, the Security of Critical Industries in 2018, and its enhancement last year by the Enhanced Response and Prevention Act, ERP 2024. These are driving many organizations in industries that previously haven't been considered to relook at moving some components back on-prem. And we're seeing a surge in interest in on-prem enterprise mobility management as a result of that. And lastly, down the bottom, just a reminder to everybody that many of the EMM or MDM solutions provided in markets are not yet available through sovereign cloud because the cloud components of them are not suited to a sovereign cloud provider. An EMM on-prem like Samsung SDS's EMM is absolutely ideal for all sovereign cloud providers. This slide in a nutshell covers off what essentially Samsung SDS EMM is. Enterprise solution for enterprise mobility management, validated to the very highest levels of security, and we'll cover a bit more of that later. Provides for integration and orchestration with the rest of the Samsung product set and company, particularly the devices and the NOC solutions associated with the devices. Gives end user control or IT admin control, apologies, across the app management in that environment, allowing deployment of batch deployment of applications to specific devices at scale. Has a toolbox of additional features that support the needs of a very specific frontline worker community. And it's not just limited to a Samsung and Samsung NOC environment. It does support the full plethora of operating systems that are available in the mobile marketplace. So in short, it's an enterprise-grade enterprise mobility management platform that does everything you would expect, but it does it on-prem, and much more specifically, it can do it behind a firewall, air-gapped from the internet. So the value proposition falls into three segments. The first segment is quite clearly the highest level of security. The first organization to achieve common criteria certification for Android, which is back in 2015. Other security classifications have followed from there. And Samsung are spending an awful lot of effort in maintaining these security levels where other vendors have chosen to let them lapse. The second area of value is the clear power and ability of Samsung to integrate the electronics company's componentry of the devices, be they engineered specific devices or generally commercially available devices, with the NOC product set as best in class to achieve these higher levels of security. The third area of the value proposition is in combining that mobile security with the productivity tools needed behind the firewall to achieve the outcomes. Normally, these productivity tools are attached to cloud platforms. So many of the EMM vendors have such productivity tools in their existing cloud solutions. But until now, none of these productivity tools have been available at scale to organizations who need to install on-premise or behind that firewall. What I'd like to do now is to go into a couple of the key features in slightly more detail. The focus for the organizations has been on developing the EMM to focus on blocking information leaks, defending against external attacks, and enhancing the manageability of the platform. So I won't go through all of the components that are in those small words in the blue on the right-hand side, but I will pick on a few of them just to highlight the sort of things that you should expect from this secure EMM environment. SDS's push facility, the push server, allows the distribution of information and messaging whilst behind a firewall in an environment that excludes use of cloud connectors. Now, I make that point deliberately because if you compare it to the other organizations who are doing this, like down the bottom, you can see a reference to APNS and WPNS, the Apple push notification service, the Windows push notification server. They both have to use cloud components in order to communicate with the device. Samsung SDS's push server is designed and architected to work behind the firewall. So the device can be contacted behind the firewall without going through the internet and without going through the cloud in order to achieve that direct communication, making it both more efficient and more secure. And on the right-hand side, yes, app tunneling exists for many MDM and EMM vendors, but again, it uses the cloud to do so. In this environment, Samsung SDS used their internal app tunnel to prevent external attacks, connecting the app to the user directly behind that firewall. A few more words on certification. It is no mean feat to achieve common criteria certification. It requires constant testing. I think the first testing was done in 2015 for Android. We were the first organization who extended that to include iOS as well as Android in 2017. And I think we're now on the 4th generation of certification. Every couple of years, every 3 years, or 2 or 3 years, it must be recertified. And what you get with common criteria is a tested, certified version of the product that is then recognized by the ASD here as being fit for purpose. So we only need to test it once to the level that we have to for common criteria. It's actually used in testing labs out of the US. And once those labs have provided the security clearance, it is available to all organizations worldwide who have adopted those common criteria. And Australia and New Zealand are 2 of those. On the right-hand side, you see a list of other certifications that have been achieved by Samsung SDS in relation to the EMM. They are critical in varying different industries. I'm not going to go through all of them now. I'm just going to encourage you to, if it's important to your industry, to look more deeply into those. And I think you will find that the certification that is achieved by Samsung SDS across the board is unparalleled in this EMM industry. A couple of other things that I'd like to highlight, which are technically part of the NOx platform, the NOx platform for enterprise, KPE, but they play an incredibly important part in achieving these highest levels of security for an EMM on-prem. The unique ability to double encrypt data at rest, which is called dual data at rest, on the left-hand side, is part of that hardened level of security, so that data is protected both at rest when the device is turned off and when the device is turned on but in locked mode. And that dual encryption provides a second level of security that is not achieved by anybody else. On the right-hand side, the VPN chaining, again with a dual VPN approach, provides the highest level of security to protect identity from the end user of that information. So IP addresses are not available to the end user, and the end user addresses are not available back through the system. And with a second channel as well. These are standard NOx platform for enterprise functionality, but they are used to harden the tool set for the on-prem version as well. Rather than highlight any more specific product or features, of which there are plenty more, and I'd encourage you to go and look online at the information available, let me take you through a few of the use cases that we have found for the solution sets. It would surprise nobody, but the first couple will be military applications. This particular first one is a defense-grade rugged deployment, embedding the security software that I've been discussing into those devices and manage them from a secure EMM. The little asterisk after the rugged device referred down the bottom that says these rugged devices, which are military grade, are not available generally commercially. If anybody has a need to discuss such specific bespoke devices, please reach out and we'll connect you with the right organization of people. So the solution here is designed to secure mobile architecture. We can cover it across NOx, the electronic firmware of the air, the e-photo deployment of updates, plus the enterprise mobility management to secure communications in the field for a military environment. The second one is a slightly different environment, even though it's another military application. It's the mobile security on a Navy vessel. This is where the organization wanted to allow users to have a standard issued phone, not one of those bespoke secure devices, which was called a COPE device, a corporate owned personally enabled device, single mode of communication to receive tasks, to communication on board ship, obviously to handle things like crisis management, but at the same time to lock it down so that whilst it is a public phone, it cannot be used, for example, to take photographs and communicate to the outside world. You can only use to communicate on the designated network. Again, the solution set was a regulated version of the EMM, the common criteria version of it, with the app tunneling embedded in the solution set and deployed on a ship-wide basis. Now, these solutions are often deployed when by a military systems integrator, and you can pretty much imagine that every single military operation around the world has a use for this sort of system. You can see how broadly these EMMs are deployed. The next use case is an emergency services use case, in this case from Turkey, where using the NOx service plugin, the KSP, the rugged device has been reformatted to use the volume button for managing notifications in high call volume areas. So this is a unique solution that we have using the tool set that I referred to earlier that enhance the usability of the solution platform. And it's the ability, it shows the ability of combining an on-prem EMM with the capability of the Samsung NOx platform to manage the kiosk experience for the user. A couple more examples. This one is from a prison environment where the need is there to protect or control the access that an inmate would have to the external world, depending upon class of prisoner, depending upon time of day, depending upon location. So some prisoners might have the ability to go to, say, a library area and use a computer that has a restricted communication to the outside world. And this solution set has been architected to enable that. And then a different prisoner might come in at a different time of day with a different level of access. Quite critical in managing of a prison population, and another interesting use case for an on-prem EMM. And finally, for frontline workers, though I point out these frontline workers are actually military personnel, deploying a frontline worker monitoring applications for health to the frontline worker community, whitelisting applications to the devices that can be used, and obviously blacklisting those that cannot, and providing this in a very secure environment so personal information remains secured within the military envelope. So I hope you found some of those use cases very interesting. They are certainly the use cases that we see across the Australia and New Zealand marketplace. Be very interested to hear from any of you as to any other use cases for the solution set. But it is very much the reason why not all EMMs can and should move to cloud. There is still a very valid place for an on-premise environment for an EMM, and more importantly, for an EMM that is behind the firewall air gaps from the industry. So in summary, Samsung SDS's EMM is a very ideal on-premise environment for high security organizations, which seamlessly integrates the rest of the Samsung product set through the electronics company from Knox and the Samsung phones, and provides that unified platform that enhances highest levels of security for all secure environments. I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions at all. If you have any questions, please raise them in the comments section. Or if there are no questions, then please either reach out to Samsung SDS directly through that address at the bottom, emm@samsungsds.com, or to my contact details, andrewf@mobiliseit.com, or my phone number here, which is here on the screen.